Welcome, warriors. In this week's episode, I welcome friend, fellow author, and advocate, and super fun, Wendy Hooton, to the podcast. She shares about her life as a child in preparation for life as a mother of a child with special needs and her way of thriving by sharing with others. I can't even say grab a tissue with this one, unless you want to have one handy to wipe your eyes after laughing a bit. Let's rock. Does your past haunt you? Maybe you're in a storm that feels like it will never end. Are you fighting a battle that's rendering you hopeless? Maybe you feel like you're fighting alone, but your battle was not meant to be a solo endeavor. You were meant to be a warrior among warriors. My name is Heather, and I grew up thinking my battles were nobody's business until I found myself in an abusive marriage and felt cut off from all avenues of help. In this podcast, you will hear warriors' words. They will tell you of their battles, both won and lost, their journeys, and their lessons learned along the way. But we don't stop there. These warriors will share how they have applied those lessons to go from warrior to survivor to thriver. Whether it's an abusive marriage, illness, mental health crisis, or any number of traumas this world dishes out, these warriors will use their words to help you find the beauty in your broken, move beyond your battles, and become the thriver God created you to be. Pick up your sword or boxing gloves and join the battle. Your words are powerful, my friends. Make them warrior words. Welcome back to the Warrior Words podcast. Today, we are sharing joy, talking about superpowers, and quite possibly starting a third-party campaign for president. Want to know more? Keep listening. Our guest is Wendy Hooton, a mom, author, and advocate, someone I have the pleasure of calling a friend, even though we've never met in person. Wendy is an author, speaker, Down syndrome advocate, and a warrior. In her chapter, I Am, of the anthology Share Your Brilliance, Wendy provides an overview of how she began to earn her warrior status, circumstances that forced a young girl to grow up quickly. Then, at the age of 23, 3 hours into her journey of motherhood, Wendy was surprised by her baby's Down syndrome diagnosis. That day, she became a teacher and a student. Her warrior status kicked in full force. Through healing, hope, and humor, Wendy shares her journey of her son's unexpected Down syndrome diagnosis in her memoir, Big People Don't Pee in the Park, which was released in October 2023. She hopes to create a dynamic space of connection and provide resources to help others reach their warrior status. We had a lot of fun during this conversation, but also shared some important stories and lessons. Before we begin, it's time to share another wonderful review. This one is from Women Finding God, Stories That Need to Be Told. This podcast is what I needed years ago as I was trying to heal from my abusive marriages. I love that Heather is being brave enough to share not only her story, but the stories of others, all while encouraging us to keep growing and thriving. Her story is inspiring. Wow, so sad and so sorry to hear that you had to experience that too. I hope you have found healing and found a way to thrive now. I appreciate your bravery and your kind words. Would you like me to read your review on an upcoming episode? Please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review for the show. Your comments and star ratings help people find the Warrior Words podcast, and it only takes a few minutes of your time, and it would help us so much. Thank you very much, warriors. Now, on to the show. All right. As you heard in today's intro, I am honored to have Wendy Hooton on the podcast today. Welcome to the Warrior Words podcast, Wendy.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Heather. I'm so excited for you and doing this project.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving your time. I just appreciate you being here and willing to answer our questions or my questions. So you and I have a lot in common. And I'm so grateful to have met you through a mutual group to which we both belong. I guess that's what mutual means, isn't it? Yes. So, you shared with me a little bit about your upbringing and the birth and raising of your son. So, you also brought out an interesting point about each phase kind of being a preparation for the next phase. And I like your word phase. That was very interesting to me, looking at it that way. So, can you share a little bit about each of those phases and then how you battled each one?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't think I was born a warrior. And as I shared, as you just called out, I had my phases. And I feel like my first phase was when I was around the age of 13 and my parents got divorced. And I had two younger brothers, and we ended up being raised by our father. And he was in the military, so he was pretty strict. And also, he worked the night shift so that he could take care of us. It was a financial decision for him. So that meant that a 13-year-old was in charge of helping with my brothers. And I had to grow up really quick. I had to make a lot of sacrifices while my friends were out playing and doing things they wanted to do. I was home kind of doing mom stuff, making sure my brothers got dinner and the homework was done. And so it was kind of hard. I felt like I was deprived. Now that I look back, I wasn't really all that deprived because I did get to have fun and do the sleepovers and stuff. But, I also had to make a lot of sacrifices for a 13-year-old girl. And then after that, I worked through all that. And my phase two was when I believe when my son was born. And at 3 hours old, he surprised me with the Down syndrome diagnosis. And I was only 23 at the time, so it was very surprising. And I, to be honest, was devastated. There was very little known about Down syndrome back then. Or not, there wasn't very little known, but I had very little exposure, I should say. So yeah, I was thrown into the world of being a mom, and not just a mom, but a mom of a child with special needs. And then when he was 3, phase 3 happened, and I became a single mom. So my life went from hard to harder. And, it was actually very hard. I mean, there were times that I just wanted to give up. There were days that I just didn't want to go on anymore. I didn't want to live anymore. But I was dealing with emotions of being that mom and being single and finding my new normal. But then I realized, you know what? My baby, he was defenseless. Any decisions I wanted to make about my life, I needed to put him first. So I had several pity parties. And then I just put my big girl panties on, and it was he and I against the world. And we just started tackling our challenges, head on. And we were faced with many. And, in that phase, I feel like all the stuff that my dad was teaching me helped me through phase 2 and phase 3. So what I originally felt was a strict dad, had all these rules, and I had all these sacrifices I had to make. It actually was grooming me to become a warrior.
Wow. And that's a great way to look at it. Like I said, we have a lot in common. I had that military dad too, and that strict upbringing. And then I also gave birth to a special needs son and found myself to be a single parent. So
Yeah.
I can relate to all three of those very well.
That's probably why we get along so well.
Yes.
The universe brought us together, Heather.
Amen to that. Yes. So grateful for that. So you had a lot of choices to make then, as did I. I remember that well. So when you learned of Matt's diagnosis, and I'm sorry, I introduced Matt's name before you brought him up. So, but
Hey, I'm just Matt's mom, so
yes, I can relate to that. We sometimes lose our identities when
Yeah.
we have. Well, I think every mom to a certain degree, and then moms of special needs kids. It's we put our kids first, and sometimes to our own detriment.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but along those lines, you had some choices to make, both when you got that diagnosis and then when you found yourself a single parent. And you shared with me that you had to feed the warrior within, and that's another phrase that I really, really liked. So, can you describe what does that look like to feed the warrior within?
Well, one of the other things that I grew up without is confidence. I lacked confidence, and you kind of have to find that confidence to be able to advocate for yourself and for your child. And so to feed my warrior, I had to just suck up a lot of the woe is me, the why is me. And instead of feeling that way, go for it. Just nothing's going to beat me down. I am strong. I've got this. Go ahead, bring it, but I'm going to come back. So I just had to, uh, figure out how to have that confidence in myself and feed that warrior. And, just the more you tackle, I think the more it grows. So, you tackle, you overcome, you tackle, you overcome. And then with each thing, that warrior grows. So I'm a firm believer that all women are strong, and we don't realize the strength until that we each possess, until we're put in a position where we have no choice but to take care of ourselves, to be our own voice. And so it's just not letting other people tell you what you can and can't do. I can and I will do this. And it's that thought process, that mind strength, all of that helps, or it helped feed me, and that I try to get other women to understand and believe in themselves as well. If that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. And you bring up that point about your voice,
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And we don't even know that sometimes we even have a voice, or we don't know how to use that voice, because we do listen to everybody else around us. And now with the media everywhere, we listen to everything. And what
Mm-hmm.
we need to do is to listen to that voice, or to find it, to listen to it.
That's right. And it's okay to disagree with what others might be trying to tell you if you don't feel in your gut. Like I've always, my thought has always been to trust my gut, not my heart, because my heart will deceive me. So if you don't agree with what somebody else is trying to tell you or trying to talk you into, trust your gut. Listen to yourself. What's best for you and your child. If you have a child who has special needs or is differently abled, you are their advocate. You know what's best for them, and don't let others try to tell you otherwise.
Yes, exactly. Because you are the mom, and you're the one that is living that experience out day to day. I remember when my son had SSI for a long time, and then when he turned 18, they said, "Oh no, he's quite capable." And my response was, because it wasn't about the money, it was about somebody telling me that my child was something that he wasn't necessarily. I said, maybe you should come spend a week with him and see, you know.
And good for you, because just because they reach an age that somebody else thinks, okay, they're healed, they're all better, that's not how it works. You don't just hit that age and everything's, I mean, I had somebody ask me one time, so when will he always have Down syndrome, or has he been fixed? And I'm all,
Wow.
yeah, no, this is how. And so, it turned into an educating moment, but yeah, we know what's best for our child. And like you just shared, and like I said, you got to be that voice.
Yes, you do. So, which brings me to an interesting point. A mother's battle is never ever done, as both of our children are now adults. And especially when you are the special needs mom and they become adults, you don't have that that age of, I don't know, maybe emancipation, graduation. They don't necessarily do that like society says they should.
Mhm.
So, and you had turned that moment into an educating moment, a teachable moment. And I am reminded of the memoir that you just wrote that I have here that I absolutely love. So you're doing this in a way to educate others and to help them with their battles. So if you could share with our listeners a little bit about Big People Don't Pee in the Park, and maybe how the title came about. I think that's because you have a great sense of humor, and it is all throughout this book, in addition to all of the struggles and the battles.
Well, thank you. It was important to me that I write a book that was full of humor. So basically, when I've always wanted to write a book, I just had a different idea of the book that I was going to write. But after the pandemic, I found myself, well, actually, let me step back even further. Right before the pandemic, I unexpectedly lost both of my parents within 4 months of each other. And so, I found myself wondering what my purpose was, because I watched my dad's stuff end up loaded off to go to the recycle or to the Goodwill or to, to be donated, and I just looked at all of his stuff being hauled away, and I found myself wondering, what is my purpose? And I think a lot of us experienced that around the pandemic, or right after the pandemic. And so I became a part of the Great Resignation. And after 36 years, I resigned because I one day was sitting on my couch reading a book, and I heard this voice say, "Help them." And I was like, "Help them?" Well, I had recently been online on social media, and I had seen some parents post in our Facebook page about their diagnosis and how they were struggling processing the information. And when I heard that voice say, "Help them," I thought, they are so new on this journey that they have no idea of how amazing this is. And not to sound cliche, but it is an amazing journey, and it's one that I wouldn't trade for anything.
Yes.
Coming from in the beginning when I was devastated and so afraid, to now 33 years later saying, "Oh my gosh, it's the best thing that ever happened to me." So I decided to write my book, Big People Don't Pee in the Park. And I decided to share stories. Each chapter is a story. So I decided to share stories of the funny or uncomfortable situations my son has put me in throughout his life, and then the humor that goes with it. And it was important to me that I write humor into it, because I wanted these parents to, one, have a glimpse into their future, a window into what their life is going to be, and two, to see the funny, to laugh. Because who couldn't use a little bit of laughter,
Right.
In our hard times, when we're trying to process. So I that's why I decided to write this book. And I did share in my first 3 chapters how my journey began. And I was very authentic. I was very nervous about putting that out to the world, because some of the details in those chapters are things I had never shared with anyone. And at the advice of, I had 2 mentors who helped me write my book. And at the advice of them, they suggested that I keep those emotions in and that experience in, so that the parents could find me relatable to them. So I was very authentic and very nervous about sharing it with everybody. So I go from those first 3 chapters, and there are a few chapters in there where I do share some hard things. But for the most part, I did try to focus solely on humor. And the title, Big People Don't Pee in the Park, that actually was a title that I thought of years ago. I mean, my son was 10, so probably 23 years ago. But it was going to be a different book. And then when I started writing this book, I was like, this title belongs to this book, because right from the get-go, right from the cover, my hope is to draw in those parents or anyone who needs to read this message and make them pick up the book and see what it's about and want to buy it and read it. So, but it is about one of the chapters in my book, a situation that my son put me in at a park when he was, I just mentioned, 10 years old. And I found myself hollering out, Matt, stop. Big people don't pee in the park. And he happened to be peeing in the bushes because he needed to go to the bathroom so bad.
Oh.
So that's the story of how my book came to be and the reason why I wanted to write it. And the feedback I've received has just been overwhelming. I never dreamed that I would reach the audience. I intended it initially for new parents, but I've been received so much feedback from people who don't have kids with special needs, who have kids with special needs that isn't Down syndrome. I've just heard that the message in my book is something that we can all take away, so that feedback has been just so overwhelming and so humbling. I haven't been able to completely process how well received it's been.
Yeah. Well, I will say, if you see, there's a couple different pieces of paper in here, and one of the pages that I marked was one of the things that you talked about. And I'm not gonna read it out loud, but I will let everyone know that they need to read pages 28 and 29 because it's exactly what Wendy was just talking about. And I had to stop when I read that because it made me tear up. Because I remember when put this down. I remember when I got my son's diagnosis, and he was a lot older. He was 7, and my son was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And the first thing I did was look up what the heck was it, because I didn't know. I had no idea. And they said, well, it used to be called bad mother syndrome. I was like, oh, okay. And I think that
How sad is that?
I know. Yeah, it took me a bit to recover from that one.
Yeah, I've never heard that. And that's horrifying.
I can't remember where I read that. It probably was not in the DSM-4 because that's what I was looking in at the time. I think we're up to 5 or 6 now. I don't remember, but I was devastated. And to be able to have a book or a resource where you get that glimpse into the future, whether it is, hey, this is what your life's going to be like. This is the reality of it. Or, this is the humor of it. This is the joy of it. This is the love and experience of it. I think that would have been a little more helpful than bad mother syndrome.
Right. The information that's out there, or that was out there for us at the time, it was just as scary as reading or hearing the diagnosis. Right. So I can't even imagine reading something like that. You just mentioned something that I actually put in my book, and that is that my son was probably a teenager, maybe even in his early 20s. And I was complaining about something. I was sharing a story at work one day at lunch, and I was so frustrated with something that Matt had done. And all of a sudden, one of my friends at the table just said, you do realize that Matt is no different than our children, right? And I went, well, I'm trying to show the world that. And she goes, no, seriously. The difference is you're experiencing this 15 years later than we did. So anyway, that was an eye-opener for me, because all this time I'd been advocating for him and thinking, that the world was just, against us. And it is in some aspects, but overall, my kid was just like their kids. So that was reassuring to hear.
Yes. And they do the same things. It may be at different times. And one of the things that I learned is you still celebrate milestones, and sometimes you just celebrate them at different points along the highway.
Yep,
and,
exactly.
to be thrilled when your child, does this or does that. And okay, so maybe Sally's kid did it at age 2 and your kid does it at age 10. It's still a milestone and it's still progress for your child. And yeah, they do the same things. They live the same. Yeah.
For
You
the most part.
articulated it better.
No, for the most part they do, but we still have our challenges.
Yes. Yes, we do. So, but you also brought up that you had to be an advocate and you had to find your voice, not only for Matt, but for yourself. And you were sharing that before this book, there was another one where you wrote about a little bit more about yourself. Can you share a bit about that too?
Sure. 2023 was a great year for me because I had the opportunity to participate. I wrote my book and then I participated also in an anthology. And that's where several authors come together with a story, to complete another book. And in my chapter, I wrote my chapter is titled I Am. And I decided in this book to write about me, what made me me. And so I shared, some of the information about me growing up and my dad's being strict and stuff. Um, but I just wanted to introduce Wendy, who am I? And like I shared, I've struggled with confidence. Um, I've had to find my inner strength, and my dad, as strict as he was, he taught me so much that I didn't realize until later in life. And, what I perceived as being strict was actually what I call grooming me with my superhero powers. And so I call my dad my own Stan Lee, because he was creating a little
Yes.
super mom, so to speak. But he was strict. He was on a budget, and he raised us kids, and I had to, and as a result, I am a strong, independent, um, oh my gosh, I call it menopause brain.
I can
um,
relate.
Determined, reliable, dependable, committed. When you agreed to something, you followed through with it,
Yeah.
So he just instilled all of that in me. And I think that's what helped me become the stronger woman as I went through all my phases. So I share those parts in that story about how I learned what I learned, and how I got my strength and got my voice, and how attitude, attitude is a
Yeah.
lot of what feeds that warrior. Am I a victim or a victor? Am I going to succumb
Yes.
or overcome? So it's all attitude. And life is hard. We all have our challenges. Every single person has our challenges, but you can choose to be a victim or a victor and come out on top. And I'll tell you what, as hard as it is nice to be able to go back and say, hey, I did that and I got through that, and I'm a stronger individual because of it. So
Yes.
that's what I put in my chapter. Again, addressing women, trying to help women find that superhero, that warrior within them, believing in yourself.
And using your voice to amplify you and what you've learned, and then helping others to do that as well. And
Right.
that's my definition of a thriver, is being able to take those, the stories that you just shared and the lessons you learned as a result, and then being able to pass them on either to future generations or to the current generation even, and help them with their battles and help them feed their warrior within. One of the things that we like to talk about on the Warrior Words podcast is thriving after the traumatic events. And as I mentioned before, mom's battles are never done. And so I don't necessarily mean to use the word thriving after, because I think we continue and we continue to battle day after day. And so, but going back to the concept of thriving, how do you see yourself thriving today after the three phases that you talked about throughout this episode?
I love this question because it made me think. um, I honestly, in case you haven't been able to tell, I love to help. I love to help other people, and I feel like maybe that's one of the um, oh, how do I say this? One of the pieces of my purpose is
Okay,
it's just
yes.
come natural to me, helping others through it. I just step in and but with my books, I it just made me stop and think, how can I help? You know, how, how can I do this? And so I've just wanted to somehow get the word out there, to women, to parents, to anyone who is doubting themselves or who, uh, may not believe in themselves, which I guess that's kind of the same thing. But, I just, I love to help people. And I feel like it comes natural to me. And I hope to be able to do that by sharing my books, by sharing my stories. So thriving. And, I'm in a new journey. This whole launching a book or two books, now I'm thriving to get the message out. Who can I reach out to? Who can I speak to? How can I find myself approaching people in the stores or whenever I'm out in public now, and just not necessarily to speak about my book, but just to speak up about the journey. And you got this, mom, you're going to be okay. So
Yes.
I've just really grown, I think, in just the last few months with my voice and feeling confidence in approaching others and helping, you know, uh, reaching out to podcasts, reaching out to people, anyone who will listen to me for 40 minutes because I want to help. I just want to let people know that, life is hard and you've got this. You're going to be okay.
Yes. And I like how you do it. Each of your books, the your memoir as well as your contribution to the anthology, they come at it from different perspectives. One from the perspective of a parent of a special needs child, one from the perspective of you as a human being, as a woman. And so you get to use your voice in two different ways, maybe to help multiple groups of people. And I like that. I really like that. And then speaking of voice, you have an audiobook. You have an
Yeah,
audio version coming out
I
very
do.
soon.
I had several people asking me if my book was going to be out on audio. And so I've spent the last couple of months recording it. I did it myself.
Yay.
It felt like a given since everybody would, or many people would tell me that when they were reading the stories that they could hear my voice. So I thought, well, then I guess it must be my voice meant to read it. So
Yes.
um, I actually just finished recording it. We've done a first phase of editing, and I am planning to release it in March, hopefully by the second week in March, because on March 21st, it's World Down Syndrome Day. And that's the day when the whole world comes together to celebrate inclusion and awareness. And I like to say, let's live more like Matt. Let's
Yes.
be more compassionate. Let's be more loving. Let's be more kind. Let's live that day with kindness. These individuals have no agenda, and so they are just enjoyable to be around. And I, strive every day to be more like my son, more forgiving, more loving, more kind. And so, anyway, to celebrate this day, I was hoping to have this book done on Audible, and fingers crossed, I think I might be there.
Well, congratulations. No, that is awesome. And you what you said there, I strive every day to live more like Matt. I,
Yeah.
I that touched. I'm gonna tear up now because I think that I think that is so important when you recognize someone who is loving and forgiving and kind with no agenda.
Mhm.
I think that's who we all should strive to be like.
Right. And, with things are just crazy right now, people don't know how to feel, don't know what to think, we're all over the place right now. And,
Right.
and I think we're forgetting to find the joy, to see the joy. And these individuals, those who are differently abled, they are so joyful. And if we Matt for president.
There you go.
Just kidding. We might our world might just be nothing but Disney and superheroes, but
Well, some might say there's nothing wrong with that. We need more laughter and fun and
yes, exactly. So
smiles. Yes, we do. Yes, we
yeah,
do.
for sure.
Okay, so as we wrap this up, do you have any last warrior words for our listeners that you would like to share with them today?
I think I may have just said it. Live more
Yeah.
like Matt.
Live more like Matt.
Yeah, let's find the joy and um I end each of my days asking myself, three questions. What made me smile today? What are three things I'm grateful for? And did I live today? Did I love today? And did I matter today? So I guess that's more than three questions, but three series of questions. And it makes me just stop and think about that day. And then I wake up the next day and, just do my best to find the joy, to be the joy. I am still a work in progress.
Aren't we all? Yes. Until the day we die, yes.
Yeah, but I'm more aware, and so I do really. So that would be, first of all, find your strength, find your voice, and find the joy. I guess those would be my warrior words.
That. I love them all. Okay, so if anybody would like to come and get a copy of Big People Don't Pee in the Park or learn more about you and Matt, where can they come and find you?
Well, my website is wendylhooton.com. And you can purchase my book on my site. There's a lot of information on my site about Down syndrome. I've got a little blurb out there introducing you to Matt. And I have some resources that I've put together to help new parents, just tips from a mom kind of thing. And then my books, you can get them anywhere. You can buy them online, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, or Walmart, Books A Million. So anywhere you can buy a book online, you can buy it online. So,
well, excellent. So I will make sure that we have the link to your website and link to buy the book. And then once it's available, we will put the link for the audiobook.
So. Thank you. I can't wait.
Me neither. I learned that I really enjoy listening to audiobooks in the car. They're perfect. So
yeah, I'm an audio queen.
All right. Well, thank you, Wendy. You are so generous with your time and your lessons learned. And I really appreciate you and, just amazing, amazing time. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for giving us this platform to share our stories and our message. So this is awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We'll see you next time. I hope you found Wendy's story inspiring. I sure did. Sometimes finding your confidence and your voice comes after many phases of battles. I love how through it all, Wendy remembers to find and savor joy. Then combining that with humor shows us in word and deed how to help others along life's journeys. I also love the questions she asks herself at the end of each day. Do you have a way that you examine your day and how it went? If not, try adopting Wendy's questions and evaluate how you are thriving in your day-to-day life. Well, that's it for this episode. We'll see you next week. Remember, never lose your sense of humor, warriors. And Matt for president. Until we meet again, armor up, fight the good fight, seek beauty, and make your words warrior words. God bless.